You're listening to STP Radio.
Welcome back to STP Radio. I'm your host, Smita Mishra, and I'm excited to conduct another interview with several of our upcoming speakers at our fall STPCon conference. In case you have not signed up yet, STPCon will be in Dallas, Texas from September 19 through 22nd this year. And if you reach out to me, I can share with you a discount code that will save you on your registration. Be sure to check out stpcon.com, where you can learn more about the conference, the speakers, our special events, and our conference pricing. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram. You can find us at SoftwareTestPro on both of these. So let's meet our guests today. Today we are interviewing the members of our performance testing tracks. We have with us Mark Tomlinson, Eric Proegler, and James Pulley. Welcome to STP Radio, gentlemen.
Hi, Smita.
Thank you.
Nice to be here.
All right, so I would like to start with a quick introduction from each of our guests today. So as you are called upon, please let us know a little about you, your current role, how you got into testing, and anything else you would like to share with us about you. Let's start with you, James.
Let's see, a little bit about me. I currently work for an organization called NUCO, Performance Engineering. We have a number of lines of business you may have heard of: Load Runner by the Hour, Cloud Architect, LightSquare. We're a performance engineering shop. How I came to performance engineering, performance testing is a little bit of an accident. I was leaving one software vendor, and there was this really interesting company called Mercury Interactive that was hiring, and they hired me. So I had been working for an operating system vendor, Microsoft, a networking vendor in the form of Banyan Systems. I'd done database work when I was at Microsoft as well. So a lot of my background lent itself to this job. So that's kind of where I came from, how I arrived. That was in 1996. So I've been doing this whole performance thing for about 20 years on a formal basis. I think it's kind of cool.
All right. And now, Eric.
Okay, my name is Eric Proegler. I've been in performance testing for about 13 years now. I took the route that many take into performance testing, where I was the considered a quote-unquote highly technical functional tester. And, hey, we should do some of that performance testing. You're promoted. Go figure it out. I took a course from Ross Collard, and also in Dallas, interestingly enough, back in 2003, and it kind of all took off from there. I was working for a software vendor at that point. These days, after some time consulting, I am the product manager for Cloud Test, a load testing tool.
Cool. And now, Mark.
I am the performance Sherpa. I've been to the top of the performance Mount Everest several times, and now I spend all of my life just helping other people ascend to the peak of their possible performance. Although I didn't start as a performance tester 20 years ago or more. I started running trains together and doing functional testing, which had some interesting timing perspectives built into the code. But so I've worked at Microsoft for many years, overlapped a little bit of time with James at Mercury Interactive back in the day. And although we didn't know each other actually directly, in different capacities. And I recently worked at Hewlett-Packard, HP Software, with that wonderful product. I think you guys remember Load Runner. I think it was a meager. No one really knew about Load Runner really in the performance world. It was a small product, not much to mention. And now, like I say, I spend my time carrying the bags for other people who are ascending to their performance success, the top of the mountain.
Super cool. Let's talk about you and the conference. You have a workshop, Infuriatingly Fun Performance Puzzlers.
Yes.
It's a great workshop that we have done at STPCon before. I've seen people really engage in this workshop. I have myself attended it. So do you want to give the audience a gist of what it is about?
Sure, Smita. I think actually James and Eric and yourself, all of you have been in one of my infuriatingly fun performance. Is that true, Eric? I think you've been in two, maybe.
Yes, and I have to say that the part about infuriating is exactly as built.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. Yeah,
Totally. And that's the idea, because honestly, Smita, the experience that a lot of testers have, not just testers or testers that are coming over to performance, they're somewhat used to a good amount of structure. Like, here's the functionality. You kind of have these, I don't want to call them blinders, but you have some limits on the scope of focus. You're usually looking at specific interactions, specific test cases, or you imagine these test cases in your testing session. And when it comes to performance, sometimes since the context or the perspective for performance testing is usually late in the process, sometimes it's trying to problem solve or do troubleshooting on performance issues under tremendous pressure with a very short amount of time. And you're very limited by the anxiety of the engineers and the management around you. So the pressure is on you to be the shining star of, wow, I can solve this performance puzzle quickly, and I can do it without too much argument or too much labor in the process. And so what I find is that emotional experience for most new performance testers is very discouraging. And a lot of people that came from even development or operations, which are very structured and very, I don't want to call it rote, but it's rote kind of structure, they really get massively discouraged. They get angry, they get disheartened, and they leave the profession of performance because they're not used to this high pressure cooker of kind of being on the spotlight. And so that's what I wanted to do with the puzzler session, was help people experience or practice doing that kind of pressure cooker thing with a performance puzzle. And also, as you guys remember, it's very collaborative. So we break into groups, and you have to learn to build consensus and take in other people's perspectives and communicate with the group, building consensus, which is a huge part of being a good performance engineer. And so, and at the same time, just being me, it ends up being quite fun. It's a little bit of a competition between the groups, but mostly we've gotten really good reviews of people saying this was just really fun when I did it as a 1-hour session. And then everyone said, can we do it as a workshop? And I think in the spring we got through 3 of the puzzlers, which is in one setting, like the entire morning session in the puzzler session. And people, their brains were fried, Smita, by the end. Totally fried.
I completely agree with you. And in fact, I've been there, done that. So I get what you're saying exactly. Mm-hmm. It's as much fun, but it's like really, really frustrating you why you can't get to the exact answer, although you have the team and everyone working with you.
Yeah,
right?
Totally.
So Eric, you have a workshop too that's interpreting and reporting performance test results, which is a very great workshop that we've already done at STPCon before. It talks about metrics and reporting. So do you want to share with us like which metrics are important or how it's different from testing or something?
So the workshop is about the phase of performance testing that occurs after the test has been run. So making sense of the results that you have, and kind of finding the issues or lack of issues or the need for more information as you look at the results. And then I think something Mark touched on that's really important is the reporting part of performance tests. I've seen some great performance tests that people shrugged and kind of threw back on the table and never really looked at again. So the importance of being able to communicate what it is that you've learned and what it is that you suspect and to ask the right questions is a really huge part of being successful at performance testing. If you do a test and what your test doesn't inspire any action, then you might have kind of wasted everybody's time and money. And the easiest way for that to fall through is to not be good at reporting what you saw. So then people don't know what actions they should take.
I think if it's like not even job half done, if you're not able to communicate what you really want the follow-up actions to be.
I think that really is an advanced testing skill and maybe the most important one. And people sometimes approach testing or performance testing in terms of, can I use this tool? And that's not really the right question if you're going to be really good at this.
Yep. So coming to you, James, you have a workshop, Finding Performance Defects in the Application Exhaust. Everybody knows James has been speaking with STPCon for a long time, but this is his first workshop, and we are super excited to have him do this. The description looks very detailed, and I'm sure performance testers and engineers will be interested in hearing it. So what should they plan to learn and take away from this workshop, James?
Most of us are familiar with the work of Steve Souders, high performance websites. And anyone who's read Steve's books or looked at the utilities that are available online, such as Google PageSpeed or GTmetrix, if you notice, they all have this single user view of performance on the system. That is, we're going to decompose the page and we're going to look at it. But where is the server side complement to Mr. Souders' efforts? That is, where do we have the pattern analysis on the server that shows where the server is using a lot of time and where we can recover resources? That is what this course is about. The visual analog is getting your car tested for exhaust emissions. That is, we put the probe up the exhaust pipe, we run the vehicle, and we say, okay, your first spark plug needs to be changed, your air filter needs to be changed, and you need a tune-up. And then once you get that done, you will be more effective or higher performance. We're going to take a look at the application exhaust. We're going to look at the logs that show up on the web server, and we're going to look for these patterns of use, which are high resource and high time consumptive. So the server parallel to what Steve Souders does at the client, and then look at how to modify that to improve performance. So we have a different perspective. It's not really a performance test. It is finding a defect which has a high cost, which then can be prioritized for a fix by development or operations. And so this is something that can be taken from development through build, through functional tests, through the entire life cycle, all the way up to production to find these issues and fix them.
This sounds really like something that hands-on performance test engineers could immediately learn and take it back to their work and implement it and really add value to their customers.
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready to sign up.
Yeah, I'm way in. I hope it's at a time I can go. Because there aren't too many performance testers limit the available information for finding things. And what James is talking about going and finding data from production is maybe even more effective than constructing some simulation and running a test with a tool.
I
love what he's talking about.
Yeah, boost the credibility for sure. When it comes to arguing that you actually found a problem, I find a lot of folks, maybe James in the class, people will learn, hey, how to defend your position with real data.
Yeah, and we're actually going to look at how to measure the cost of something. So it's not just we have a defect, but here's priority-wise where this defect or pattern fits with all the other issues that we need to address. A common one might be a 404. A developer doesn't want to go and fix the 404. Said, oh, well, how much, it's going to take me so long to fix it. And look, it only costs 2 by 67 milliseconds on this product page. It's not worth my time. But then you look at the logs and maybe you find that is the most expensive thing the server does, is address the 404 for those 2 missing elements. Well, hey, now we've got a priority because we can recover one entire server in production.
That's true. So coming back to you, Mark, you also have a roundtable, What's New with Performance, a roundtable discussion. And we do several roundtables at STPCon, and this one is a big hit. Gives the audience a chance to talk together on problems that performance teams face and an opportunity to share some tried and tested solutions. So do you want to elaborate on this one, Mark? Yeah,
the inspiration for it is mostly I have a long history of having all of the what's old in performance testing roundtable. What's the old technique that you're not doing? What's the old tool you're not using? What's the old conversation you're not having? What's the old practices that you forgot to do and now you're in pain? And those are all really interesting perspectives on the way to help people. But it's kind of a bore. They're like, oh well, you didn't do this, did you? You didn't do the rendezvous. You didn't remember X, Y, and Z, and all this stuff that a guy like me, after all these years. I've spent a lot of time in the last 3 or 4 years with a particular set of customers that a lot of new testers to performance and a lot of mentoring on my part. And so that's changed me and my perspective as to what new approaches, new ways of talking about performance and performance testing new tools, and the way people put tools together now is very different than many years ago. So I wanted to have a roundtable for newcomers to performance testing, but more importantly, sort of old performance testers that potentially are like, wow, the world has changed beneath my feet when I wasn't noticing. I really need to figure out what is new and have a conversation and maybe have some Q&A. And a roundtable I thought would be a great way to do that, because we have so many good performance folks at STPCon who can talk about, hey, this was the old way, but here's how we do it in a new way, and with new tools or with new techniques, or integrating with DevOps, or integrating with more agile practices. And so, yeah, that's sort of the inspiration. As you know, Smita, we've had roundtables sometimes, like you say, some of them are a hit. I was in Paul Grasaffi's automation roundtable last year, and it really wasn't a roundtable. It was just a packed room full of nonstop conversation. So I'm hoping for something that is that popular, but we'll actually probably try to moderate it more like a lean coffee. We'll probably moderate it that way. So it should be really fun.
I think it will be a perfect place for even testers who are looking to migrate to do upskill themselves and do more performance testing, and have several questions on how do they get started.
Yeah.
So you also have a session, Mark, about performance teams and strategies, which is a new session and talks about how to build a new performance team. And it's great for organizations that are looking to build out or start a new team.
Yeah, this is a totally new talk. It was inspired by a conversation I had at Belgium Testing Days with a handful of people, Christine and Gitta, and I forget who else was there. And it sort of extended this idea of, again, like for me, giving advice or trying to help people, and sometimes the language I use or the way I'm imagining they're structured or the way they're working doesn't quite fit. And so I look at the way teams organize themselves in Agile, how people engage in roles. We look at popular trends such as either session-based test management techniques or mob testing, paired programming, and paired testing. And I'm going to look at some different team paradigms with some input from these various testers who are doing functional testing and in some cases performance testing, and sort of extending, different strategies if you're a test manager, if you're a new test lead, and let's say you had the automation team and the functional team, and now boom, you get the performance folks. How do I integrate performance people into testing performance and working correctly, or working in an optimal way in different strategies? The other part, like thinking about what James mentioned about Steve Souders, the whole front end web performance part of the job is something that is also missing in a lot of performance team strategies, a lot of older performance teams. So I'm hoping to highlight a little bit about practices upstream in development, in QA, in normal QA testing, but also downstream in DevOps, and how your strategy is not an isolated performance team, but how are we integrating that performance expertise or that performance skill into other disciplines in a shared way, in a paired and shared way. I'm going to make that.
Yeah.
So that should be fun.
I can't even stress enough how good that's going to be, especially for those leads who are actually hiring for performance also. A lot of times you don't have the performance test leads in place, and then suddenly the functional test leads are trying to interview for the performance engineers, and then maybe this will be a good platform for them to learn more.
Sure. And it's also the fact that a lot of leads, let's say a QA manager, even director of QA, when they get the performance folks, they just they don't change their strategy. They just kind of like, well, you guys, Eric and James, you do your black magic performance thing. I don't really know what you do. I don't know how to incorporate your skill. I don't know how to blend the team. I don't know how to help manage the process or the escalations and all these other parts. So, and different team cultures or different organizational structures impact that merging of teams. And a lot of times it can tear things apart. It'll spin off in three directions. So I'm thinking about our good friend, Mike Lyles, who has adopted the performance team and the automation team in a couple of his jobs in a leadership position. And those were some of the things he and I talked about over the years. How do I really manage and enhance what the performance team can do and get more value out of it?
Absolutely. So coming to you, Eric, you have under session with us that's early performance testing. What else shifts besides left? And one of the key takeaways talks about demonstration of performance testing in continuous integration. So that sounds really interesting to me, but can you give us some more hints on what it's going to be about?
So this session is about getting performance feedback earlier in software development lifecycle. It seems that performance testing, for a long time, at least the way I learned it, was about doing a test right when code was complete, right before some go live date. And these days, people don't really have that. They're releasing fairly regularly, and you need to have some performance feedback along the way, but you can't wait till the end. And that we've figured out that doesn't work for software development, and we're doing much better testing as a result, where testing is providing feedback to software development. We can do the same thing with performance, where we can run some sort of simple, quick performance test against a really straightforward code path, and just look for when things like session models get fatter, so that we can get that feedback back to the developer as quickly as we can.
In your experience, Eric, these tests have been giving as effective results. They do not really become kind of useless or inaccurate at a later stage.
Well, the idea is that so what I'm going to try to talk about is that not all performance tests have to be an accurate prediction of production. Mm-hmm. So for a long time, we've tried to do one performance test that tested for reliability and tested for scalability and tested our infrastructure and tested how production was going to perform, as opposed to the approach that I'm suggesting here, which is, let's just see how we did against yesterday. Let's just see how we're doing as a software project. Are we getting slower, or are we getting faster?
That makes a lot more sense. Yeah. So
well, it's not an either or. It's not either or, but I'm saying we could supplement it with getting this feedback earlier.
Most definitely. I mean, I don't think in the given scenario, like we discussed with software development evolving to a stage of continuous integration, there is no point that we just sit and wait till the end only to realize there are so many issues in performance. Coming to you, James, I have so many interesting details that you shared with us, and I would like to share a couple of them with the audience. And very specifically, how come you have shaken the hand of every U.S. president since Lyndon Johnson, except the current one? I can't even imagine. I don't know anyone who's done this. So how did you do that?
Well, a lot of it was just in my travels. So I encountered former President Nixon when I was working for Marriott. While in college, I was visiting Columbia, South Carolina. He was a guest at the hotel. For President Ford, I actually ran into him in an airport as he was traveling and I was traveling.
Did he fall down the stairs in front of you?
No, he did not. He didn't trip over shoelaces or the invisible crack in the floor or anything like that. President Carter, I met him at the Carter Center in Atlanta when I lived in Atlanta. President Reagan, I met him during the 1984 reelection campaign. I attended a campaign event similar with President George W. Bush. I met him at a campaign event when he was running in 1988 following President Reagan. For Bill Clinton, I met him at a campaign event once again. And George Bush, very similar. So I've met all of the presidents since Lyndon Johnson, most of them at campaign events, one in an airport, one in a hotel, and have not shaken the hand of the current U.S. president.
So we have to arrange it. Smita, can we invite Obama to STPCon? Can we get him as a keynote speaker?
Why don't you actually try that? We should actually, yes.
Just for James's sake.
You might
talk about software quality.
you might be able to get candidate Clinton, but there might be a fee involved.
A large one.
James, on a serious note, did you really plan to meet all these people? I can assume that you did plan when you were visiting campaigns, but otherwise you did not really plan to meet them, right? It just happened.
No, it just happened. Just in the natural course of travels, you run into people. I think the more you travel, the more opportunities you have to run across people from different walks of life. I've sat next to Andrew Young on an airplane. I've sat next to Mary Lou Retton on an airplane. I can't tell you the number of times that I've crossed paths with major or minor celebrities, politicians. Heck, Mark and I have had a discussion that generally when I travel in an airport, I'll be accosted by someone that I've crossed paths with on the internet, answering a question or offering advice, and either they'll be upset with me or be happy with me, but in the end, we share a beer. It's just kind of an interesting aspect to travel, I guess.
This is so freaking crazy. Honestly, I know so many of well-traveled people, but honestly, I have not really come across anybody who bumps into celebrities so often. Anyways, that's good luck to you. I hope you meet all the presidents.
If you get James to have a drink or two, he'll tell you about the time he met Ryan Lochte in the restroom.
No.
Sure.
There are no restroom conversations. I just want to.
Yeah. All right. Coming to you, Eric, even you have some interesting facts about you. And I really want to know about your interest with stand-up comedy and which one is your favorite. And another one is you follow NBA and you like baby animals. Now, how do these two get together? Like two different things.
I think our basic humanity responds to these things. I mean, there's the stand-up comedy. We like to laugh. My favorite stand-up comic is probably Moshe Kasher. He's very funny. I'm a big fan of Amy Schumer, kind of the alt comedy scene, more or less. So I see a lot of live stand-up. A lot of people who are up and coming too. I'm not really so much for seeing somebody in an arena or anything, but I have been to a couple little dumpy comedy clubs, and it's a pretty great experience. The other part of the humanity, the baby animals, well, of course. So out in San Francisco, we have this tea house that's modeled after this kind of Japanese tea house that does the same thing. It's called Kit Space Tea, like kitty, except that this is a place where you drink tea, and there's a whole room full of cats and kittens. And they crawl all over you, and you get to play with them and pet them and things like that. It's very therapeutic. I can't think of a better way to spend an hour than to play with kittens. Available for adoption, by the way.
Awesome.
Have some tea and then have your faith in the goodness of the world restored.
It reminds me of Bonsai Kitten. Remember bonsaikitten.com?
Oh,
in fact,
remember that they used to groom a small kitten in a jar. Sorry,
very
maybe that's
very contemporary reference there, Mark.
Yeah, no, I think it's
I
right up
that on MySpace once.
Yeah, no, it's right up there with hapsmadeofmeat.com.
In fact, the moment I hear kitty and kittens, I want to again think about James, because he seems to be irrationally disturbed by things when they say Hello Kitty. What is that, James?
Yeah, for some reason, Hello Kitty just strikes me very, very odd and messes with my inner sense of balance and everything else. So
he has no mouth.
Yeah, Hello Kitty doesn't have a mouth, right?
For whatever reason, I can't put a finger on it. It's just hits that weak part of my spine and causes my shoulders to shiver and just say I got to get out of here.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so note to self: Hello Kitty products to STPCon to give to James.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I have a couple of group questions, which there is no order. You can all of you can respond to it. Performance testing has always been such an interesting topic, especially at STPCon. And many of our attendees come specifically to hear the tracks related to performance. I was interviewing Mikko Hipponen this past week. He's our keynote speaker that is going to talk about security. And he was talking about how the world is changing so fast. One thing he mentioned was that many kids today can't imagine a world without Google or smartphones or social media. So my question to you is, each of you has seen many changes in technology over the years. What do you think are the major changes that have driven performance teams to modify or alter their methods or practice?
Okay, I'll go first. The biggest thing I've seen change is that as the application stacks changed from the client server applications running inside of one data center to applications that people are accessing through a browser now from anywhere in the world. And there are things like content delivery networks in between the client and the resource that you're talking with. We had the Steve Souders name drop a little bit earlier. He's kind of pointed the way that in the modern world, 80% of performance is outside of your firewall. So you don't really get to control that the way you can control how your backend performs. And I think that's changed for a modern performance engineer. That's significantly changed the nature of the job because it's not a closed system anymore, and it's not identical client conditions. Now we're talking about different kinds of clients, different form factors, all accessing the same resources with the backend, serving dynamic content based on which client is asking. It's a much more complex problem than it used to be when it was test 200 desktops, opening up a database connection and asking for some data.
To me, I listened to the great podcast, by the way, with Miko, who's an interesting guy. He'll be a great keynote, I think. And one of the things he talked about was complexity, and it was I was a little confused with how he mentioned complexity, making things less secure. And it could be that because we have more interdependent systems, Eric, your point being we used to have very self-contained systems. Now we have more complex, interdependent, but separate systems across multi-tiers and microservices and such. So one of the things, not just architecturally, but I think people becoming aware of the Achilles heel of the non-functional world is kind of what Miko was getting at. It's like there's increased complexity, which means we're less secure. And oh my gosh, how come we didn't think about all of this before? Well, to Eric's point, we didn't have to think about that complexity because it was a nice self-contained mainframe app. And then there was a client and a server, and only those two things could be secured. It was only one channel, one protocol, very simple. Now we're in the complexity makes it less secure, was counterintuitive to me at first. And I think in performance, it has the same challenge. The complexity of interdependent components within the services architecture means you have less and less control over which component may or may not be the culprit or the performance bottleneck or the performance issue. And understanding scope architecturally for your performance test becomes a huge challenge. And it becomes a political challenge because sometimes a tester is held accountable for things that are nearly impossible to test. To James's point about third-party components and rendering on the front end. I can't do anything. We can't do anything about the Adobe component or the third-party call for the time and temperature or the stock ticker running somewhere else. Why am I being held accountable for that rendering in my SLA? And so I think to Mika's point about complexity, I think the same thing happens to security as well as it does performance. It makes it much harder to manage a single point of performance response time or throughput or scalability, and actually leaves you more vulnerable to having performance problems everywhere across the architecture.
Mm-hmm.
Picking up on Mark's theme, I say we are much more fragile today than we have been in the past. Part of that is due to this, in-factor complexity issue of we have many, many moving parts, and any one of them can be a bottleneck in the process. But two other parts to that are the rise of nearly infinite resources, or what a developer thinks is a nearly infinite resource stack. Well, I can just, grow to scale in Amazon as an example. But and so they're leaving performance optimizations on the table. But something that has always been true is that poorly performant code will always grow to fit the resource pool available. Even if you have a nearly infinite pool, memory eventually runs out, network eventually runs out, CPU capacity always runs out. It's just a question of when is it going to occur? And it's probably going to occur at your time of highest load and most criticality. So there's that going along with it, where people are kind of orphaning code optimization and performance practices because of this unlimited resource pool concept that is available. And there has also been quite a bit of de-emphasis on the server side of performance that's risen with Steve Souders, where Steve is saying 80% is bound to the client. And that is true up until the point where the server degrades. And at that point, then you're beginning to shift the balance between the client weight on performance and response time back to the server, because the server is overloaded with requests or processing. And this gets back to this non-code optimization and limitless resource stack issue. So we're fighting some marketing issues. Steve's done great marketing. He's helped to optimize the front end. But the backside to that is, hey, well, we really don't need these performance testing people anymore because 80% of what we need is on the front end anyway. And so this de-emphasis just kind of flies in the face of what actually happens in production.
Mm-hmm. In fact, with the changing world and business models, I have seen a sea change on how performance testing is done now compared to in past. For example, in recent years, we see almost every big business do holiday preparation. Like they have performance test teams sit and actually prepare their systems to handle the traffic at holidays. This was something which was not probably a norm a few years back. And so we have definitely covered a long distance. But my other question for you all, the entire panel, is, what do you think is on the horizon for performance testing and engineering? Like, are there things we should be getting prepared for to support our organizations in the performance space in the near future?
Everybody is going to have to ask a performance question. We've traditionally left that to the performance testers or the performance team, similarly as we do security these days to the security team. Everybody at every stage of production is going to have to ask that question. So this is a tie back to Eric and his presentation on shifting left. And not only are they going to have to ask it, they're going to have to answer it, and they're going to have to make a decision on whether to promote based upon performance, even if performance is bad, but functionality passes. Today, a lot of those questions are being ignored. And this leads to this increase in fragility moving upstream.
I would say that the larger arc is that most companies are becoming technology companies or software companies to some extent, in how they're changing how they interact with their customers. They're changing how they operate. So this kind of brings everybody to the table for talking about performance. Because suddenly, performance just isn't one corner of my work, or one type of customer interaction doesn't perform well. Now it's everything. My revenue stream, my customer service flows, they're all being affected by poor performance. So that I definitely agree with what James said about bringing more people to the table. It also just kind of raises the stakes. So it generalizes the responsibility for performance to more people, but it should, because there's a bigger need for more people to be thinking about performance, and cultures have to change to adapt to this kind of world.
I'd say even, Eric, in business context, we've even seen executives resigning or getting fired due to specifically performance issues, but also general quality issues with Delta. Healthcare.gov, all these different police people have stepped down, and so this goes all the way up. That's a big cultural change as well. I also think tools are going to change, and tools. I've seen this explosion in the open source world of incredibly capable tools, hybrid business models that really do know how to make open source work at the same time. Commercial products and revenue and services and support side go up. And I think really for new performance testers, they don't remember the old days when I got my one tool to rule them all, and that approach is all of the people manufacturing in the tool space, which is an essential part of performance testing and engineering. And you'll see both in James, several of the sessions, people talking about how the tool helps you to even get the data you need to know the decisions and conversations and questions to ask. So I think for the future of performance, tools it's going to be a big change to how you're measured as a performance engineer, performance tester, to be able to adapt all of this data into telling the story, asking a question, and deriving an answer and remediating based on all the tools you can pull together. So I think performance testers are going to see even more change and upheaval in how we build the tooling to get the job done. That'd be a big part.
Mm-hmm. So coming back to the conference again, we have so many great keynote sessions and workshops. And as you look over the program, I would like to hear from each of you which one or two presentations you want to be sure to listen to. Let's start with you, Mark. What are you looking forward to hearing?
To be honest, Mika's keynote should be pretty awesome. Mm-hmm. There's one particular. I'm a big fan of Melissa Tondi. I think you did a podcast already with Melissa. Yes. And she's doing one about balancing technical acumen and user advocacy, which is, I think, a lovely 3-step dance that happens with performance quite a bit, because you have to be architecturally acute and technically good. So Melissa's just going to be really awesome. There's another good friend of ours who I've never met, and I'd be curious to see what he's going to present, is Tim Koopmans, who's also, he's a fan of the Perf Bytes world. He joined us on a couple shows. So Tim's doing something from 0 to 1 million requests per second. And it just seems like a big number. So not that I may not learn something from a performance tester, but Tim's, again, he's using like all new tools and all new approaches in what he does with the Flood.io stuff. So it'd be great to meet Tim, but also, what does it mean in 2016 to go to 1 million requests per second versus my own experience? And so keeping fresh and keeping good with that. Those are two that are really good. I'm just scrolling down even the list here. There's so many awesome things about continuous testing. Obviously, Eric's session should be pretty cool, because I think Eric, years ago, I did an early performance testing, and now you're going to have a whole new approach. So I can learn something there. That'd be cool.
James, how about you?
I'm picking a kind of a balanced track. I've got the Only Specialist Can Do Security Testing from Jim Sivak. Yeah. And I think that's going to be good, because security and performance tend to be isolated specialties today. And if we can combine our efforts, if we can combine how we look at performance with how security is examined, maybe use some of the same tools. And security also has usually the ear of the C-level. So that can actually raise visibility and value to performance. And so I'm very interested in hearing what's going on there, because getting back to what I mentioned earlier, everybody has to ask a performance question. Well, everybody probably has to ask a security question too. So I'm quite interested there. And then there is Scott Moore. He's doing a performance testing HTTP 2 applications. That's coming fast and furious in the industry. I have a whole bunch of questions stacked up ready for Scott and ready to go. He's probably like, oh, great. But, I've been looking at the back end questions on HTTP2, how the servers are going to manage this performance. And so I've got some questions for Scott, and I think he'll do a great presentation. And then Bob Cruz has a section on Internet of Things, impact on testing. Bots have been growing at a tremendous rate across the internet. I think the majority of all traffic on the internet these days is from, spiders, walkers, blasters, and other types of agents. So it's going to be interesting to see what comes up on the Internet of Things. Is it more functional, or is it performance related?
Eric, how about you?
Gee, James got my top 3, so I'm kind of scrambling a bit. I think that going to Mark sessions are always pretty fun, because you're not sure what you're going to get. It's not, what it's not going to be. It's not going to be 30 slides and somebody reading them to you. It is going to be a lot of people interacting, a lot of Mark posing a question, then just looking at the room and waiting for them to respond.
The
So
sessions are
I think
always
that
fun.
if you're looking
Yeah.
for something to do, you can pick up a lot about performance, just kind of soaking up these conversations. And that actually really helped me early in my career to shut up and listen and scribble down some notes and go Google things later. And that was pretty helpful in learning some advanced stuff. Just seeing somebody as experienced as Mark, listen to what terms that he's talking about and who he's referencing, and then writing those down.
So I have one last question for each of you to answer. And so each of you have attended and participated in STPCon before. What would you like to tell the audience about the program and why they should attend? Eric, what would you like to share with the audience?
That there's it's very it's practitioner heavy at STPCon. That there's you're likely to be listening to somebody who does it on a day-to-day basis, telling you, talking to you about testing. So you're going to learn something from people who are actually doing this. Sometimes things get theoretical. You get a consultant, you get a vendor, and maybe your feet aren't under you entirely when you're trying to understand what they're getting on about. If you talk to a practitioner like a James or a Mark or Paul Grazafi or some of these people, you're going to hear them tell you what they do, and I find that to be really valuable for a testing conference.
Mm-hmm. James, how about you?
Everybody needs a peer community for support. We see this quite often on the internet. People go and ask a question, but you do need a small consolidated group that you can pick up the phone and just say, I have something weird and I need a second opinion. I know I've done that to Mark. I think, Eric, I've probably done that with you before. I've taken those calls myself. And within organizations where quality assurance can be a small subset of a much larger organization, it's hard to build that, hey, I have something weird, I need a second opinion. Conferences, especially STPCon, where you have so many hands-on practitioners, give you that opportunity to build that peer community, establish that relationship, and just say, hey, if you ever need an opinion, give me a ring. I'm happy to help.
Very true. Mark, how about you?
It's the single malt scotch mostly that keeps me coming to STPCon. And see, told you it's not even noon yet here in the East Coast today, so I'm game with that. I got to switch over to some nice Elay malt, I think. Anyway, no, to me it's the camaraderie. It's not just that you have the professional experience, as James points out, to share from other sessions and real practitioners, which I like. But there's also just the experience of being a tester and, just the personal support of, hey, I'm in a tough situation with management, or I'm hearing this kind of situation. There's also huge networking. A lot of people come there, I'm stuck in my job, or I'm looking for something new, or even in the worst case scenario, they've just been, booted from their job. And, STPCon is a great networking event, and some of that networking does happen late at night over single malt scotch. But it happens throughout the entire time. There's great space and great permission, even though we're in usually intense sessions. Sort of the out of session time during meals and during all of the social aspects are always really great for networking and just having camaraderie. We like to say, be with your tribe. I like to spend time being with my tribe of performance testers and test professionals, because in my normal life I may be the only tester on the team. I may be the only person that sort of speaks my language. So it's kind of fun just to get that support and kind of be with your tribe, and it's great.
It sounds so warm and welcoming. So I'm sure that will inspire a lot of people to actually come over to the conference. So thank you, each of you. Thanks for participating in this episode of STP Radio. Thanks, Mark, Eric, and James.
Thanks, Smita. I'm really glad we kept it to 30 minutes.
I had a great time learning more about you, and I'm sure our listeners feel the same way.
Thanks, Smita. It's awesome.
Thank you, Smita.
Thank you.
Thanks to all of you that are listening to this interview. Stay tuned for more interviews this month from our upcoming speakers. And most importantly, we expect to see each of you at STPCon in Dallas, Texas next month.
Thanks for listening to this episode of STP Radio. You can find out more about STPCon coming up in Dallas September 19th through the 22nd by visiting STPCon.com. For more information, discounts, and more STP Radio episodes, follow us on Twitter @SoftwareTestPro.